They're a little cantankerous, these salt effects, but I've got a few insights that I think will give you success every time.
Ooh, the cobalt's granulating? What is it doing here? I don't know what's happening right now. All right, this is really doing something on the hot press, and it's so crazy. Okay, that's so weird.
I have discovered a paint that has superpower when you put salt on it. This one had the superpower. I can't wait to tell you more about it. Welcome to Technique Tuesday, and this video is for those of you who have tried to have salt effects and they just don't work the way they do for everybody else. Why can't you get the salt to work? It cannot be that hard. And it's not if you know a few secrets. And in today's Technique Tuesday tutorial, that kind of has a good ring to it, right? I'm doing a new series, by the way, if you haven't noticed. I'm doing a Techniques Tuesday series where we're going to take a deep dive into different techniques every Tuesday. And because it's me, we're going to talk not just about the how, but the why of these techniques so you move along your painting journey a lot faster. That being said, my name is Rachel Parker Varner, and I like to teach not just the how, but the why of watercolor so you move along your painting journey a lot faster. I do have an online school. I'll talk about all that at the end of the video just for those of you who are interested. But for now, let's dive into all the things that can make you or break you when it comes to getting beautiful salt effects in your watercolors. So I did some research for this video and I found a few holes that I had questions. My main question that I wasn't getting answered by what is out there already is, how does salt react differently depending on what paper you use it on? The most important art supply that you can invest your money in that will make your painting look different is paper. So different papers will give you different results and different looks of salt effects, but I haven't found a good video tutorial on that. So today we're going to look at an experiment I did testing out some of the paint colors I suspected would have really good salt effects, and I had a few others that I suspected would not have good salt effects. So let's take a look at this footage.
Hello everyone, and I want to talk a little bit about salt effects in watercolor painting because when they work, they're gorgeous. And here's another example of where I use salt effects, and they just came out so beautiful, but it can be so disappointing because sometimes they don't work. And it's like, why? I did the same thing almost, but got totally different results. Well, it's because there's so many variables. There's the kind of paper you use. There's the paint you use. Differences even probably in the binders that watercolor paint manufacturers use. Some paint manufacturers put honey in their paint. Others use maybe oxgall. Core has their own additive that they use. I forget what it's called, but all those different variables will affect how your watercolor paint salts out. I call it salting out. And the most powerful salt effects I have gotten is with this paint color. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you what has worked for me, and I'm going to answer some of my own questions in my research. I went and watched a lot of videos about what others have found to work for them. And there's a few holes in the videos out there about salt effects. And the main one is there's not any good comparisons that I found comparing cold press paper, this is Meeden cold press paper, which I really like. I painted a painting called Boss's Intermediate Level Cat. For my Patreon students, I created a painting of the same cat on 3 different papers for 3 different levels of student. I used a student grade paper for my beginners. I used an intermediate grade paper for my intermediate students, which was this, because this is a cheaper paper, but it is really good. But it's cheaper than Arches cold press. So for my advanced students, I used the gold standard watercolor paper, Arches cold press, and it was a great way to compare papers. Paper is the #1 most important art supply affecting how your work will look. So it makes sense that when you're trying to figure out what salt effects look best you try it on a few different papers. And for you, I would suggest you do your own experiments, but for the good of the group, I'm going to do the same colors on cold press and the same colors on hot press. And this is my Fabriano Artistico hot press paper that I have been enjoying painting on. This was painted on this Fabriano Artistico hot press, and I got salt effects on it, so it did work. And I also painted this, which gave me great salt effects, on a cold press. So this is cold press paper, and it gave me salt effects. And this hot press paper by the same brand gave me good salt effects as well. So I am just curious to see, one, how do two different types of paper, cold and hot, react with the same paint colors? Paint colors, in my experience, has been the number one thing to having success with salt effects, which is why you may notice I used the same color in both this painting and the background of this painting where I knew I wanted salt effects. I used this same magic, this tube of paint is magic that creates salt effects. So I'm going to share that with you in both this painting and the background of this painting. Also, we'll look at different paint colors on different papers and compare results on salt. So real quick though, before I start these experiments, let's go over the variables that will affect your outcome.
Let's talk about all the variables that can affect how well your salt effects salt out. So there's how wet is your paper?
If it's too wet, the salt won't work. If it's too dry, the salt won't work. You need it somewhere in between glistening and coming out of the glistening stage and going into the buckling stage. If you don't know what I mean by that, I did a whole watercolor tutorial that was very popular featuring Joseph Zbukvich's watercolor clock, where he talks about using different levels of paper moisture paired with different amounts of paint to water ratios. So paint to water ratios were on this side, and paper moisture levels were on this side. So you can have all different kinds of combinations of how wet your paper is to how watery your paint is, and that will all give you all these different effects. I went into that in that watercolor clock tutorial, and I would be remiss to not mention, since we're talking about Joseph Zbukvich, which this book was published years and years ago, and it's now out of print, and this costs like $200 if you want to get a copy. But someone told me this is a secret, but now it's probably not. She said that she went to, I think it's, Watercolor Live event or some big event where Zbukvich was painting, and he hinted that he might be coming out with a new book. Oh, that just gave me chills, y'all. So Joseph's work excites me. But also, please let me just take a moment to mention his wife is also amazing. And I became her fangirl before I knew she was married to him. So when I found out last month that they're coming to Charleston, South Carolina, which is about an hour away from my house, I looked into what was going on. He's having a show, he's teaching, it's sold out. So I found Lisa online and asked her, do you plan to teach? And she said no. And then I said, can I organize a workshop for you? And she said yes. So y'all, as of this recording, there are a few seats left. It has sold fast, and Charleston is also selling fast. So if you plan on needing a hotel and you want to come in and learn from his wife, Lisa Wong, please look into all that information. I will post it in the comments if you ask for it. But I would be remiss to not go down that little rabbit hole. Sorry. All right, let's get to our experiments. All right.
There is, what kind of paper are you using? What kind of paint are you using? Different paint manufacturers put different binders in their paints. Core uses their own binder, and another paint manufacturer puts honey in it. All those would affect how well your paint color salts out. So there's paint brand, and there's also the pigments in paint. For example, if you look at a paint tube, you might notice that they have these names and numbers on them, like PB6. What is that? That's the actual pigment name that stays the same across manufacturers, across countries even. So PB6 is what we normally know as lamp black. PB means pigment black, and 6 is the name that has been assigned to it by the pigment industry. So that's a standard name that will be the same on all paint tubes, no matter what the paint manufacturers name that color, whether they call it lamp black, ivory black, night black. There's all kinds of different names manufacturers give to their paint tubes, but the pigment names stay the same. And so some pigments react to salt more than other pigments do. So there's that. There's humidity. There is also how much salt you apply. There's type of salt you apply. So you can see how it gets a little overwhelming.
I'm going to try a few of the colors that I wish granulated, but I don't think they will, because these are my favorite paint colors. I have a whole video that's about a half-hour long going into a deep dive why these are my 10 favorite paint colors. I rarely use anything else except for like when I wanted the salt effects, and then I used a new color. So we're going to talk about all that. So stay tuned to learn my magic paint color that salts out like no other. But first, let's start with some cobalt, which I have found, it's a granulating paint. And by the way, these Meeden brushes are also amazing. I'm trying to find out what kind of hair they're made out of. I'm not sure if they're synthetic, but they feel like natural hair. Okay, so this is Winsor & Newton Cobalt Blue. If you have a cobalt blue, but it's made by Core, for example, you might get a different outcome. Okay, so I'm just telling you, there's so many variables that you really have to do your own experiments with your own art supplies. All right, so that's really wet. I'm going to let that set up for a little bit. It also, another variable that affects it is how much salt you use. So we'll talk about that, and I'll demonstrate that. Okay, so there's cobalt. Okay, so that's Daniel Smith Permanent Green Light. That's my base green I love to use for everything. All right, so we're letting that soak into the paper. We're not going to put on the salt yet. It's all about timing, which was Lisa Wung's top tip that she gave me when I asked her for one. Aureolin. This is Holbein Aureolin. It's my basic favorite primary yellow. Going on to the cold press, and then also we'll put that on the hot press. Love that color. Okay, this is starting to set up, so I better get the salt on it. Okay, so I am going to use table salt, and different reviewers have found that table salt works better, and others like kosher salt. And you don't want to put, this is a top trick secret, don't put too much. You only need, like, for this amount of space, like maybe 10 granules. I'll put some salt on the left side of these while they're still pretty wet, since I have it in my hand. And we'll just see if those do anything. And then I'll go back and add salt when these set up a little bit more. Okay, another color that has been exciting me, that is another magic color that I've been talking about. And I used it in my newest Christmas tree tutorial people are going nuts about on my Patreon. I used it in my fall tutorial. My Patreon members went nuts over that tutorial too. They're great tutorials. And I used a magic property of this Indian yellow. So if you're interested in learning more in depth with me, go check those out, because this paint does the coolest thing. Let's do another little bit now that the salt has had time. My fingers are wet to set up. So I'm trying to put the salt on at different times, because that will affect our outcome as well. I'm more interested in Winsor Green Gold, because I feel like that might be a more successful color. I've never been able to get cobalt to salt out very well. But this is Winsor Green Gold, another really beautiful yellow that I rarely use, but it's great for cat eye color. Put on another color. But here's the transparent pyrrole orange. Get it on both the hot. Here's the hot press, remember, by Fabriano Artistico. I'm gonna let that soak in some. Oh, this is starting to granulate some. Very happy about that because I have not. Oh, this is, ooh, the cobalt's granulating? What? No way. Okay. Oh, it looks like the Windsor Green Gold is reacting. I'm gonna put a little bit on the orange over here on the left. I'm afraid of missing my window. So I'll let those set up more and then put more salt on this side. All right, okay, we only have 2 spots left. So what paint am I suspecting might be a good granulator? I'm suspecting, from what I've learned, the more staining, the more it will granulate. So let's test my theory out with Permanent Brown by Daniel Smith, which is a very strong staining color. I learned about this when I was teaching about the synthetic black mix I learned from handprint.com that creates this luminous black mix, and Permanent Brown is this unique pigment that's really staining, and you mix it with 2 other highly staining pigments, and it makes this magic, highly, very dark, luminous black that's gorgeous. So that is in my library of tutorials from years ago on my Patreon. So if you want to find it, just message me because I will have to look around. I think it's in my Sadie Moon Halloween tutorial. But anyway, there goes on some Permanent Brown, very strong color. And then I'm gonna resalt some of these as they have set up. Whoops, I put it on the wrong side there. All right, are you guys ready for the magic one? You guys have been good and patient and you deserve it. It has never, ever let me down when I have been trying to get salt effects. All right, are you ready? Drum roll. Can any of you guess from what it looks like? A lot of you are gonna know just from what it looks like. This is Payne's Gray. And this particular mix is by Winsor & Newton. It's a convenience mix. And why does this one salt out so well? Well, you've got to learn about paint pigments. And you've got to learn to look at labels, because one brand might call this Moon Glow. Another brand might call it Indigo. Another one might call it Neutral Tint. And in fact, they do. And they all have the same colors, pigments in them. Across paint manufacturer brands, across countries, the paint color industry uses the same names for pigments. So for example, this is Payne's Gray, and it is a convenience mix that include PB15, PBK, which stands for Pigment Black 6, which is lamp black. And I'm going to get this little puddle off because that's going to mess us up. And it also has, I was surprised to learn, it has PV, V is for violet, Pigment Violet 19, which a lot of manufacturers name quinacridone rose. So that's what is in the current mixtures of Payne's Gray, and you find these pigment numbers here, along with their light fastness rating and a few other things too. Often it's right there, the pigments, and I took a picture of it so I could see it, so I could zoom in. But let's see if it's gonna keep me an honest woman. And let's put a little bit of, I'm gonna put more pigment, more salt on these now that they've set up, but let's see what it does. Oh, this is doing great. Look at that. See, this is a more staining color. That makes sense. And this is a convenient mix of several colors. The Permanent Green Light by Daniel Smith. So I need to look up what pigments are in there that are doing that. I'm trying to let this set up a little bit more because I'm surprised. Maybe it's too wet. It is still puddling there, but wow, that's good to know. The Permanent Brown, which is a rare, a lot of paint manufacturers don't use that color. So I think Daniel Smith is one of the rare ones that make this pigment. Let's look up and see what pigment. PBR 25. The pigment is called benzimidazone brown by Daniel Smith. Boom. Good to know. And look, this must have been kind of dry. So let's get some more. I might have missed my window. No, it's still quite wet. Okay, I bet that'll salt out better now that it's set up a little bit. But we're gonna let those do their salt magic thing. Oh, that's exciting. This one is salting out almost as good as what I know and love. Interesting, it's not here. What's going on there? And I'm shocked that the cobalt on this hot press is having some effects. What is it doing here? It's like, I don't know what's happening right now. See, it's making me a liar. This is why you at home may have clicked on this video, because salt doesn't always do what you think it's going to do. It totally depends on your paper, your climate, your paint manufacturer, what binders they put in it, what brand paper you use, how wet or dry your paper is, what kind of salt. You can do a deep dive on YouTube about all different kinds of salt and all the different effects they get. But you will be also finding that when you do your own experiments with the same exact variables, they do something different for you. So just know, all right, this is really doing something on the hot press, and it's so crazy. Okay. That's so weird. Wow, but look at that one. It's really going nuts. Okay, so I feel like they have a softer effect, which is in general true of when you work on cold press. It's easier to blend. You get softer edges, but things look a little bit flatter on cold press. And when you work on hot press, things are sharper. The colors are brighter. They sit on top more. They're harder to get smoothed out. It's harder to do blends on hot press. Hot press has sharper looking textures, like we are seeing here exactly. So this is sharper, and you can really get pretty spatter effects on this because it shows the texture of the spatter, whereas in cold press it just all melts in and has a dreamy softness to it on cold press papers. So there's a little extra bonus tip too about the difference. All right, I'm gonna turn the camera off and let this dry completely.
By the way, after your paper dries, you can brush the salt off. So I'm going to do that now. I forgot to do it.
Okay, these are pretty much dry. They're still a little damp, but this is pretty much all we're going to get. And I am fascinated by these results. And it's funny because I really thought the hot press would be much more dramatic, but in some cases, in most cases, if I was going to get really good effects like what I would want, because I want them to be soft but have really clean white in the center and fading out to a softer finish like a feather or fur textures. Usually this is more along the lines of what I would want. And this paper, remember, was the cold press by Meeden. And this is great, 100% cotton paper. And I should also mention this paper, why I'm making a point of including them in my experiments is, one, I really truly like this paper, but also they agreed to send me some gifts that I'm going to share at my watercolor workshop that I'm doing with Lisa Wong coming up in the first week of November. So as of this recording, there are a couple spots left. So if you're tempted to join us, especially if you can just drive there, it's going to be an amazing wet and wet technique and drawing techniques workshop, but the emphasis is going to be on wet and wet techniques, and she's going to do her wet and wet technique demonstrations using the feline cat motif. So it's going to be so good. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check out the links that I will put in the comments.
All right, so in conclusion, What I have found makes the most beautiful salt effects given my art supplies, my climate, and my paper, my paint. My favorite is still, after these experiments, Payne's Gray. And I think what makes it special with the salt is that it's a staining color. How do you find out if your color is staining? Well, you can go and do research like on handprint.com, or you can swatch your colors, let them dry, scrub them to see how well they lift. If they don't lift well, they're really staining. Staining colors tend to have finer paint particles, and that might be part of the physics of why it reacts so well with the salt, because those tiny particles move much more easily and readily than, say, a cobalt blue does. So this cobalt blue is very granulating, which makes me think maybe the particles in this paint are bigger and heavier. They don't move as much. They don't cauliflower as well. They don't salt affect as well. But this paint color, Permanent Brown, is a very staining paint color. I think the quinacridones are really staining. If I would do another experiment, my next one would be the quinacridones. I would guess that they would probably have really good salt effects. And the paint colors that have PB15 in them, PB17 possibly, the phthalo leaning colors that are very, very staining. I hardly ever use them because I don't like staining paints. I talk all about that in my other paint video about my paint colors, but staining paints seem to work best in my experiments with salt effects. And if you want softer salt effects, perhaps try cold press first. If you want more harsh, smaller, but stronger, more bold salt effects, use hot press. But no matter what, you will get better looking effects if you use less salt. Use just a little bit. Make sure your paper is not too wet and not too dry, somewhere between glistening and buckling, and use a staining paint color in your mix at least. And it would be interesting to see also another experiment, and this is the fun of watercolor. There's always another experiment to do, is mix phthalo blue, say with a color that you want to have salt effects. Like, what if I wanted cobalt blue in my mix because of the color, but I wanted this salt properties of the phthalo? What if I mixed them? Would that still yield some nice salt effects if I mixed the two together, made my own convenience mix? Only one way to find out. More experiments must happen. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And now, for those of you who are new to me or are interested in learning more in depth from me, let me tell you a little bit about my online school. And I house my online school on Patreon. Patreon was a website that was designed with creators in mind. And in general, us artist types tend to have income like this. But we are not artsy corns. We need to eat. We gotta keep the lights on. We can't paint and create if we can't see because our lights are shut off. So Patreon was created for us so that people like you who enjoy learning from us or enjoying our art can subscribe to an artist, and you pay a monthly fee, a low monthly fee. The idea is to get a lot of people subscribing so no one person has to pay a lot. And so you subscribe on a monthly basis. You can choose to subscribe for a whole year. And when you do that, you get access to me for a whole year. You pay for 10 months and you get 2 months free. And an added benefit of that is you get more in-depth critiques from me. You can email me directly when you join for a year. So that's a great way to grow a lot faster. If you use those benefits, you can really pour rocket fuel on your creative journey by watching my tutorials. Even if, for example, most of my tutorials are soft, dreamy, loose, realistic animals. Even if you're not interested in this, and I have gotten this feedback, even if you don't care about painting cats, if you watch my tutorials, for example, I just did a crazy in-depth, so good poodle tutorial. Even if you don't care about painting poodles, you will learn about how to paint the shapes instead of what you think you're seeing, how to get your values right, how to build texture with layers, how to use warms versus cools, how to paint shadows, how to get your drawing right. So much is jam-packed in each one of my highly edited tutorials on my $13 tier. Another benefit of my Patreon that I just realized I was doing, I didn't even think about it, but people have been really commenting on some of the tutorials that I post that are not mine. I curate really good tutorials I run across. I'm always watching videos. And when I find something really good, I share it on my Patreon. So yes, could you find that free content? Yes, but you would have to wade through many, many videos to find it. So let me curate some wonderful videos for you. And that is an added benefit of being on my Patreon. You get tips, free videos, you get my in-depth Patreon tutorials of my own paintings. This one is going to be my Halloween start to finish real-time tutorial without ads. Sometimes I slow down the footage. For example, when this one comes out in a week or two, some of the rainbow painting part is going to be slowed down so you can keep up with me. So I paint, I slow down the footage and I have voiceover over the footage so you can really learn what I'm doing. On the screen, you will see my reference image and my paint palette pretty much at all times. So you will see everything you need to see on the screen. Whereas in a tutorial like this, I might not show my reference photo. I might not show my paint palette. I might not go into a deep dive of all my supplies, but on my tutorials, I do all of that. So you get a really in-depth, good picture of how I was successful with any one painting, and you watch it from start to finish and you can paint along with me. They come with free reference images, free line drawings, a supply list, and often extra little downloads to help illustrate what I talked about, like maybe a color wheel, or I'll outline the shapes that you need to look for in the reference photo, things like that. So they're really in-depth, really good. I get a lot of good feedback. And I would love to have you join me there. But if you're not ready to join a paid tier, you can join for free. And it's kind of like joining my mailing list. You'll still get some free tips. You'll still learn about my new paintings and see all my new work. You'll still get all my free content. So it's worth joining as a free member just to stay in closer touch with me. And I really hope you do. We have a lot of fun there. You can also join my free online communities like my Facebook group at Rachel's Watercolor Workshop. I'll link those up here. You can upload your paintings and we will comment on them if you ask for advice. And that's a great way to grow really fast too. You can also post your paintings even if you're a free member on my Patreon, which is a little more private, which is at patreon.com/RachelStudio/chats. And you can upload your paintings there, and I'd love to see you there as well. So I hope you'll check out all those goodies. Be sure to check out the pinned comment below where I will post all these links, all these goodies, a few videos that you might like to go binge. I really appreciate you watching to the end. And until next time, go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody. Why aren't my salt effects working? I did everything right. The planets just aren't aligning.